Okay, this video is going to be nice and simple. No fancy new terms, no nothing. It's going to be explaining my Cardiff half training plan, or series, I'm going to call it. I'm going to be naming it Project 124. So all that means, well, the reason I'm calling it Project 124 is because that's the time I want to be hitting in Cardiff half later on in the year. It's not until October, but the reason I'm starting to train now is because I've got a couple of races lined up, and obviously I need to be fit, nice and consistent with my training with that, as well as making sure I'm ready to do Cardiff half in October. Now, I'm going to give an in-depth view of my training, my nutrition, what I do on a day-to-day, what I do for my recovery. So it's basically a good insight about what my training is all about, what the different phases I'm going to go through, and try and get a nice bit of information back to you, let you know how it goes, if I pick up any injuries and so on. So, the most important part with anyone trying to do any race distance is training. Yes, you can do races where I need training, and you can do really good times, but you're not going to get to your potential and your best without training. So training is such a vital part to anyone's routine. Elite runners do it, beginners do it, intermediate, professional, and so on. So you're probably wondering, what is my training going to be all about? So first of all, I've got 3 different phases for it. Phase 1 is my building phase. Now, what is the building phase? The building phase is simply where you start building your aerobic base if you haven't already, or if you haven't stayed consistent with your training, or just generally in running. So this allows you to train your body to make sure it can cover the higher mileage, higher intensity, and harder workouts in the future. So for me, I'll be starting off in about, well, I've started today, but I'll be starting off about 50 to 55 kilometers per week. This is just to get me rolling and everything. I know it sounds quite daunting, but that's not what you have to do. Some people might find 30k nice and easy for their building phase, 20k even, or 5k. A starting point is a starting point. It doesn't need to be anything major, it doesn't need to be anything big or fancy. It's just something to get yourself going. So, like I said, I'll be starting off 55 kilometers per week. I'll be building it up and so on, but also I will have to be tapering a little bit, to make sure I can get my best on my races, but I'll explain what a taper is later on. So next, I've got my peak mileage or peak training weeks. This is where you'd be hitting your higher mileage or your peak mileage weeks. So what is the difference between high mileage and peak peak mileage weeks? So high mileage week is where you cover a higher distance than you're normally training for. So for that you normally train on. So for example, I normally average about a 45 to 55 kilometers per week on average, more down towards the 45 to 50 kilometers, but now and then I do creep up closer to 55. But let's call it 50 for this sake. So just say I do a 50 kilometer week. A high mileage week for me will be hanging around 70, 65 kilometers per week, which is about a 15 to 20 kilometer increase. Now, that is a high mileage week, and for some that might seem nice and easy. Oh yeah, I can do that. For you, happy days. But for some that might be their high for my 50 kilometer week, that might be somebody else's peak mileage week. Now, peak mileage week, what is it? It's nice and simple. it's simply the highest mileage that that you're covering in your training block. So for me, I've never gone over 60 kilometers a week consistently. I've hit about 70 kilometers when I trained last year, but that's it. So I'm going to be trying hitting a new mileage goal for myself. Obviously, I'll keep you updated throughout the series, which is going to be 100 kilometers a week over about 3 to 4 weeks. So this whole part of peak mileage is to make sure your body and everything's just ready, but as well as this, it trains your body to run further than the race distance. But honestly, for 5k 10ks, you will naturally go over the race distance. I normally do about 12ks, 15ks, and obviously for my long runs I do about anywhere between 21 to 25 kilometers. Then I do a park run after, which means it varies from 26 kilometers to about 26 kilometers to about 30 kilometers in in volume. So obviously I'm going over the race distance, but the reason I do this is, which, well, all of you surely can implement into your training programs as well, whether that's been 5k, 10k, or a half marathon, is it gets your body used to that fatigue in your legs. So if you're running for fatigue, with fatigue, as well as running further than your race distance, all you're doing is training your body to run that extra bit longer. And then for you doing a park run or speedy park run after, you train yourself, which is your mind, which is anyone's crucial part for running. If you don't have a strong mind, you're gonna break down easily. So doing a quick 5k after means you're training your body and your mind and your physical attributes as well to run that extra bit faster for longer. Therefore, when you reach kilometer 10, 15, 12, whatever is your hardest, you find the hardest during the any race or half marathon in this case, you find it easier because you've purposely gone over the distance and, well, equal the distance or gone over it, and therefore you can think, I've ran over the half distance loads of times and I feel good at this point. Then you know, let's go for it, I can push on from here. And the last phase for my training is a taper, or the taper phase. So the taper, you may have heard it being thrown around on YouTube Shorts, Instagram, TikTok, and whatever. But all a taper is where you reduce your mileage, in order to feel fresher on race day. Now, why do you want to do this? So first of all, we're gonna obviously the whole purpose is to feel really good on race day, and this allows you to get your best performance out of yourself. Now, I understand that things like illness, a recent loss in a family member or friend, and so on, and or you just come back from injury can affect your performance. If so, just please look after yourself. But those two things can affect your performance drastically. So, for example, last year I came off the flu. Well, the man flu, as every man, without being misogynistic here, can relate to. It is horrible, and I decided to run it because I felt good. I felt I could manage it, and I adjusted my race plans to tailor to how I was feeling. And every runner should do this because it sort of kills that ego thinking, I can run through it. Sometimes you can, majority of the times we can't. It's best to sit down, recover, and relax. And if you can, find somebody else that can run it. The second thing is it helps reduce fatigue. So Fatigue, you might have, well, anyone who's played sports or high impact sports and so on can relate to this. So fatigue is where your muscles feel a little bit, if not or achy, or a little bit, if not or you, is where your legs feel achy after a training on the day or the day after training. And this is simply where, obviously, where CO2, which is carbon dioxide, um, a little bit of that is left in your system. So obviously, if you got stiff legs on race day, it's going to be 10 times harder than running with fresh legs. But sometimes people do get their personal bests and so on, or maybe a course record with fatigued legs, but I would not advise it. And the third thing is, it just simply helps you to reduce injuries. Obviously, with any runner or any sports person, all they want to do is reduce and minimize the risk of injuries. So throughout the training block, be switching around your shoes just to make sure the foam recovers and you get the most out of your shoes. Take rest days just to make sure your body has time to recover, as well as repair any damages. Take some vitamins and supplements and so on. Make sure you eating enough, especially carbohydrates, which are your body's main source of energy. So it's simply staying on top of everything and just to help to minimise and reduce injuries. So if you've got any more questions or just about anything in general, about training, what can you do, how can you improve your weekly structure and so on, don't be afraid. I'm more than happy to answer them below, and I'll see you soon.